Let's talk about negatives for a moment here.
Okay.
And it's fair to say that Jonathan has been met with acclaim everywhere, a great acclaim, because people recognize the seeds of something. And as I try to tell people when they ask me what the Harbinger is all about, first I say read it, but if you haven't read it, here's what it's about. It's about a series of coincidences. And the coincidences link the modern United States with ancient Israel at the time of Israel's collapse. Israel fell away from God. God judged Israel. Come forward 2,500 years, the United States was known as God's country. It was founded on godly principles, but it's falling away.
Yes.
And we note the same progression of events right down to some of the details.
Yeah.
And this is where there's a supernatural aspect to the Harbinger.
Yeah, well, you said it. I mean, I was down in Cape Henry where they laid that cross when they came there and founded Jamestown, or Jamestown came after. But the government guide said, and this is government, he said, there's only two nations in history that were founded on God's word purely, and one was ancient Israel, and the other is America.
Right.
And that's true. It's nothing to do with any, that's history. And the fact is that the first Puritans, they saw America, or they founded it after the pattern of ancient Israel. Our Thanksgiving is really Sukkot, and they actually gave, in a sense, prophetic words. They said, if we follow God as Israel did, we're going to be the most blessed nation on earth. And we have been. I mean, it came true. But they said, but if we turn away from God, the same things that happened to Israel will happen to us. I mean, this is from the beginning of our foundation. The Harbinger is saying it's happening, and it's happening precisely. Israel was blessed. Israel turned to sexual immorality. Israel called good evil and evil good. Actually, Israel offered up its children as sacrifices. Went after materialism. Well, America is doing the same thing.
Exactly.
America is calling good evil and evil good. America is also promoting sexual immorality. America is calling good evil and evil good.
And offering up its children. Like the nearly 100,000 infants aborted.
Well, and the total from here is like 50 million.
Yeah,
I mean,
in fact, I use just a recent figure, but it's closer to 50 million.
Yeah, and people, they say, well, how can you compare? Well, Israel lifted up thousands. We've lifted up millions.
Right.
And so how can we do this and expect the blessings of God to continue? And so that's where it comes in, that and beginning with 9/11, that there is a biblical pattern, and we are stepping through that biblical pattern.
Now, I used the word coincidence a minute ago. Right. You have discovered a series of coincidences in the life of ancient Israel that correspond to things happening today in the United States. Now, I don't believe in coincidence. I believe that God plans things, and these things happen. They look like coincidences to us mere mortals.
Yes.
But they're not coincidences.
Yeah, so there was a man who did a statistical analysis of just one of the things in the Harbinger, which had to do with the Shemitah, which I'm sure we'll touch on, and had to do with the economic collapse of America. And he did a thing of just one aspect of that, and he did the odds, and he found it was astronomical. I mean, just for one of them, not two of them. And the Harbinger it's kind of a compounding on compounding on compounding. I mean, down to exact words and exact dates. I mean, that's how precise it is.
Let's talk about the layout of the book now. You have the sign, you have the harbingers, you have the details of speeches that have been made recently in Congress. There's so much to talk about. In maybe 3 minutes or so, lay out the progression of this book for those in the audience who haven't read the book, and show how these remarkable parallel events are developed.
Yeah, well, the first sign of biblical judgment, and this we see it more than once in the Bible, happens with Judah, happens with Israel, the northern kingdom. And that is years before the nation's destruction comes this first warning strike. And this happened with ancient Israel in 732 BC, about 10 years before the destruction. Happened with Judah in about 605, about 19 years before the destruction. So before the destruction, God is warning, and he allows the hedge of protection of the nation to be lifted temporarily, and he allows a strike to happen on the land. It's a wake-up call. It's limited, it's temporary, it's contained. And then the nation has like this period of time to either come back to God or be destroyed, revival or judgment. And so here is this first thing, this first strike. Well, it happened with America. The hedge of protection was lifted. No matter how one views it, it happened. In September 11th, 2001, there was a strike on the land. And it was limited, it was contained, most believers sensed it was a wake-up call. And if you remember what happened, Gary, is that people rushed to churches. I mean, it looked like it was going to be the biggest national revival we've ever seen. We never saw anything like it. People rushing. And yet, about 3 weeks later, it was over. There was no revival because there was no repentance. And if anything, from 9/11, we've gotten worse we've gotten much farther from God than before. Well, when it happened with ancient Israel, they responded with a vow of defiance. And that's Isaiah 9:10. And they said, Isaiah records it, they said the attack happened. They said, the bricks have fallen in the attack, but we will rebuild with hewn stone. The sycamores have been cut down in the attack, but we will plant cedars in their place. And what they're saying to God is, we're not going to be humbled. We're not going to turn back to you. We're not going to have revival. We're going to come back strong. We're going to come back against you. We're going to keep on going away from you, and we're going to do it more strongly than ever, and we're going to do it by our own power. And this vow ends up sealing their destruction. And this vow is kind of like the decoder of the harbingers. Well, the thing is, after 9/11, America did the same thing, made the same mistakes, and the same 9 harbingers started appearing. And we won't be able to go into all of them, but just to even touch on just some of them. One of them is, for instance, called the stone of judgment, or the gazit stone. That is, the bricks have fallen, we will rebuild with hewn stone. And in Hebrew, the word is gazit. It means a quarried out mountain rock stone that they're going to put down right where the bricks have fallen and saying, we're going to come back stronger. This is their stone of defiance. After 9/11, the people of New York go up to the mountains of New York. They quarry out this massive stone. It's a biblical gazit stone, tons of rock, rectangular block, as in the Bible. They bring it back to New York City. According to the mystery, it's got to go where the bricks have fallen. They bring it to ground zero. They lower it on the pavement of ground zero. They have a ceremony around the stone. They have leaders gathered of, the governors pronouncing vows of defiance over the stone. And actually, when you look at the commentaries, they all say that they're doing this in the spirit of defiance, The governor of New York says, we're laying this stone in the spirit of defiance. Literally says the same words. Then you have the sycamore, that there's got to be a sycamore that's struck down. The sycamore has fallen, linked to the attack. In the last moments of 9/11, a shockwave goes forth, a beam goes forth from the falling tower, strikes an object. The object is the sycamore. The sycamore is struck down, which is a biblical sign of national judgment, of uprooting. The people in New York put it on display. They think it's a great thing. They call it the sycamore of ground zero, having no idea of the significance here. It says then that the sycamores have fallen, but we will plant cedars in their place. We're going to plant another tree. They plant this other tree right where the thing had fallen. In the Hebrew, it's called halaf. It's a biblical act of putting a tree in another place. And they're saying, this is a sign we're going to come back stronger than ever. Well, they do that, a particular kind of tree. It's called erez tree in Hebrew, not cedar. It could be a spruce, it can be a cedar. 2 years after 9/11, a tree appears in the sky at the corner of ground zero. They lower it down to the exact spot where the sycamore had fallen. They do the same act, same ritual. They plant it. They call it the tree of hope. They have a ceremony around the tree. They speak of coming back. And what kind of tree is it? It's a biblical erez tree, same tree of judgment. And the other thing, just to touch, is then it gets even more kind of, you could say, bizarre or exact or precise or stunning, and that is that the actual vow has to be spoken. The actual vow, a leader of the land would have to say the vow. But what American leader is going to be crazy enough to speak judgment on America or, pronounce judgment? Well, 3 years after 9/11, an American leader gets up in the capital city, John Edwards, and he's speaking about 9/11. It's the anniversary of 9/11, and what comes out of his mouth is the ancient vow of judgment on America. He doesn't know what he's saying. He speaks it word for word. The bricks have fallen. He doesn't even know these things actually exist. He does his whole speech pronouncing judgment on America, saying Isaiah 9:10, making it America's vow. And even more intense, the very day after 9/11, when we were kind of in shock, something prophetic happened on Capitol Hill. The government gathered to give the response of the nation. And one man is chosen to give that response. That's Tom Daschle, head of the Senate. He gets up on the podium of the floor of Congress, and he says, there's a word, and America, this is our response. He reaches his crescendo, and he says, there's a word from Isaiah, and it speaks to all of us. And out of his mouth to Congress, he says the ancient vow of Isaiah 9:10, the bricks have fallen, we will rebuild. He speaks of the tree that fell. He doesn't even realize there is an actual tree that's just being discovered that day. He speaks of the stone that's going to go up. It's going to happen like prophetically 3 years later. He speaks of everything, having no idea what he's saying. And then he says, this is what we will do. America is going to do Isaiah 9:10, which is setting the course for judgment. It's exactly what happened. I mean, nobody could have put that together.
Now, you didn't make this happen, and
You
yet,
have to be very powerful.
and I want to point out that you've had your critics
Of course.
who point to allegorical interpretation, which is maybe not a legitimate form of biblical interpretation. You are drawing parallels where none really exist. You've heard all the criticisms and many, many more. But to my way of thinking, all you're doing is sounding a warning based upon a flow of parallel events. Now, preachers have been doing this for centuries.
Sure.
Saying we're a nation that's fallen away from God. Look what happened to ancient Israel, and using ancient Israel as an example. However, it seems to me that God has just given us a concrete example in this era, which is, to me, a warning.
Yeah.
A clear warning.
Yeah. If we're not going to listen to the warnings of national judgment from the Bible, what warnings are we listening to? It's clear the